Have you ever wondered what really separates a good chromatography run from a truly great one? I can tell you right now, it's not luck. It's all about having a set of solid, best practices that guarantee you get consistent, reliable results. So today, we're going to unlock those secrets to help you get that perfect run.
Ugh, man, we've all been there. You get that sinking feeling. You've spent hours on the setup, only to watch a run completely fail. It's more than just frustrating, right? It's a huge waste of your time, your energy, and your resources. But what if I told you that most of these failures are totally preventable? Well, this right here is your guide to getting it right, the first time and every single time. So, we've basically mapped out the entire journey to a perfect run in 5 key stages. We'll kick things off with a setup, which is so important. Then we'll move into handling your hardware, the analysis itself, figuring out what those signals mean, and finally, sticking the landing with a report. By the end of this, you're going to have a complete roadmap to success. All right, let's start at the very beginning, the setup. They say preparation is like 90% of the battle, and in chromatography, that is absolutely true. A flawless start here really is the foundation for everything that follows. Think of these 5 simple steps for your mobile phase as your first line of defense against a bad run. First off, using high-grade solvents. It's completely non-negotiable. It stops invisible contamination that can create all sorts of weird ghost peaks. And then filtering and degassing are just as critical. They get rid of tiny particles and dissolved air that, cause pressure problems and a noisy, totally unusable baseline. Trust me, your patience right here will pay off big time later. Okay, this is basically your final pre-flight checklist. A tiny leak, a vial in the wrong spot, or a solution that looks a little cloudy. These might seem like small things, but they can completely ruin your entire run. That quick little look over right before you hit start, it's honestly one of the smartest habits you can build in the lab. Okay, our setup is solid. Now, let's turn our attention to the hardware. And specifically, we're going to focus on the absolute heart of the system, the chromatography column. Now, this might sound like total common sense, but believe me, a dropped column is a tragedy. These things are precision instruments, packed super carefully with stationary phase. Just one jolt can mess up that packing, creating channels that will completely destroy its ability to separate your compounds. You gotta treat it with care. It's an expensive and really sensitive piece of gear. So here's a checklist that should just become second nature every time you install a column. You really want to pay attention to the conditioning step. You need to run that mobile phase through it until you get a perfectly flat, stable baseline. That's your signal that your column is equilibrated and it's ready for your samples. And of course, always respect the manufacturer's limits. All right, prep is done, hardware's ready. Now it's time for the main event, the analysis. This is where we run our system suitability tests and finally our actual samples. Let's do this. Now, to really get what's happening during the analysis, we first need to understand a key metric, relative standard deviation, or RSD. Basically, in a nutshell, it's a measure of how consistent your results are. A low RSD is a beautiful, beautiful thing. It means your system is performing with precision, and that's exactly what we're aiming for. So here's how we actually put RSD into practice. The rule is pretty straightforward. If your method calls for an RSD limit of 2% or less, you need 5 good, consecutive standard injections that meet that limit. If it's a little higher than 2%, you're going to need 6. This is what proves your system's precision, and it's basically your green light to go ahead with your samples. If your method doesn't actually give you an injection sequence, here's a great one to follow. You start with a blank just to make sure the system is clean. Then you run your standards to confirm system suitability. After your sample, run a bracketing standard at the end. What this does is it confirms that your system was stable from the very beginning to the very end. Now this is probably the most important rule of this whole thing. If your system suitability fails, you stop. Period. You do not move on to your samples. The run is invalid, you document everything, and you get approval before you even think about trying again. Remember this, never, ever analyze samples on a system that hasn't passed its suitability test. So the run is complete, and now we've got the data. But raw data is just a bunch of signals, right? So let's talk about how to turn all of that into results that actually mean something. The very first thing we look for is retention time, or RT. Think of this as the unique fingerprint for your compounds. If you know your target compound is supposed to show up at, let's say, 4.2 minutes, you're looking for a peak right at that time in your sample chromatogram. It's your #1 identifier. Okay, now we get to peak integration. This is where the software measures the area under your peak. The real art here is to set the parameters just right, so you're only measuring the peaks you actually care about while completely ignoring all the background junk. You know, the baseline noise, peaks from your diluent, or just random electronic spikes. Clean integration is everything for accurate results.
So we have our results, but we are not done yet. The final, and I would argue most crucial step is to finish strong with proper documentation. Especially in a regulated environment, you have to remember, if it wasn't documented, it didn't happen. This little checklist is your key to a complete and totally defensible data package. You need your logbook entries, the methods, the reports, and the chromatographs, both the full-scale and a zoomed-in version. And just like with a failed run, any weird incident like a power flicker or something needs to be reported right away. Think of it like you're building a bulletproof case for your results. And that pretty much brings us to the end of our journey to the perfect chromatography run. We've covered the whole shebang, from setup all the way to the final report. So as you head back to the lab, I'll just leave you with this one question. What's the one new habit you're going to adopt to make sure your next run is a massive success?